Earlier, we saw that knife crime has dramatically increased since 2011. However, there is a correlation between the fall in the use of stop and search and the increase in knife crime. By Metropolitan Police's own admission, black people are almost 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. Should we increase stop and search as a method for reducing knife crime? No? Can we start with the audience first this time? I heard many no's. Can you put your hands up? I know, do you have anything to say on this point? Should we increase stop and search as a method?
Well, no, I don't see the benefit of it as it's sort of random. I think I have seen something recently about like a new technology that's sort of like scanning the person, and you can do it without stopping anyone, and it will show up any weapons that are underneath clothing or anything. So with that sort of technology, if it does gain traction and is implemented, then hopefully things like stop and search wouldn't need to take place anyway. And it would be easier to, it wouldn't be something that could only happen to a limit. It could happen to they could do it to everyone in a certain area. So yeah. Okay.
I know I heard some more no's within the audience. If you could just put your hand up and I'll give priority to people who haven't spoken yet. So there's this gentleman here and that lady at the back there.
I was just going to say that stop and search isn't a solution. It's a deterrent from carrying knives out in public. So even the technology that you were just talking about, that might not be stopping anyone, but it's still a form of searching, and it will act as another deterrent. It won't actually solve any problems. So it will just stop people from carrying knives in certain situations. But if they want to do something, they'll do it. It won't stop crimes from being committed. They'll still be committed. People will still be getting stabbed, so I don't think it's effective in any way, really.
Okay. And the lady there?
Hi.
Hello.
I think it is that's about punitive regimes and it's about power. So I don't think that that's the best solution. I think investment in young people is the right solution. Mm-hmm. If I might say, I'm very much older than most of you put together. So you were talking before about youth clubs and youth centres being removed from 2010.
Yeah.
But back when I was at university, there were youth clubs everywhere, and they were open till 10, 11 at night. They were facilitated by young people, so that the much younger ones aspired to being youth leaders. They were engaged with civil society, they were engaged with local government, and so we need a lot of investment in young people, in my opinion, and not punitive action from the police.
Just one panel member on this point, please.
I think it's fundamentally obvious that stop and search is more of a directive policy targeted at searching certain people. 1999, police were declared institutionally racist. So how are we trusting a police force that is institutionally racist to somehow be unracist when it comes to stopping and searching people? Stop and search disproportionately affects communities of colour, and therefore is not while also disproportionately affecting communities of colour, police also don't represent the communities of colour there are. So if we're trusting a police that doesn't look like us and doesn't think like us and doesn't understand the communities that we grow up in and the cultures that we grow up in, why should we allow them to stop and search us? It's a malicious policy aimed at kind of scaring people of colour into not doing certain things so they don't have to interact with police forces.
So I'm just going to move on, just so that we've got time just to discuss all the solutions that we've got here. So I just want to talk a bit on another possible solution. So I just want to talk about the government's Knife Free campaign. So in June 2019, the Home Secretary announced an additional £1.5 million of funding for the Anti-Knife Crime Community Fund. The money will go towards small community projects to reduce knife crime. The fund has already supported 115 projects over the 2 years it has been running. The Home Secretary also provisionally allocated £35 million to police and crime commissioners in 18 local areas to set up violence reduction units. At the start of 2019, 20,000 personal, social, health, and economic teachers were sent new lesson plans to further equip them to challenge myths and communicate to their pupils the dangers of carrying a knife. In August, chicken boxes featuring warnings about the dangers of carrying a knife were sent to takeaways in England and Wales as part of a government campaign. Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott said the plan was crude and offensive. However, Home Secretary Priti Patel defended the campaign, accusing Ms. Abbott of playing politics with knife crime. The bad press associated with the use of knife-free chicken boxes has largely overshadowed the other steps government has taken to reduce serious youth violence. Is it right that positive government policy is often overshadowed by bad press? Yep.
I'd say no, simply because... Is this working?
Yeah, just hold it a bit closer.
I'd say no, simply because I think that 1.5 million you said, it's change to what the problem actually needs. We need, just like that lady said before, youth centres in every like normal radius that children go to. They should be open late at night. That should be the expectation. That's been took away from us because of the cuts that we've experienced over the however many years. So I think, yes, it should be overshadowed because it's not good enough.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so the question is, the bad press associated with the use of knife-free chicken boxes has largely overshadowed the other steps government has taken to reduce serious youth violence. Is it right that positive government policy is often overshadowed by bad press? I think we've got a hand up there. Oh, there's two. This gentleman and that lady.
Well, that's the role of the media, to call out the government when the government is moving mad. That was just racist, and it's completely unacceptable that a government in 2019 would outline such a policy. So the media is definitely within its right to do what it did.
Just there.
Yeah, just kind of repeating the same points, but mainly just saying that just because they're trying to do something positive doesn't mean that you shouldn't critique what they're doing. Like, if it's not good enough, then doesn't mean that they should be praised for being seen to do something, because this is what they should be doing. They should be going further than that, and if it's not good enough, then they should be doing better. That's the whole point. And I think that they're well within their, completely in their right, and it's what they should be doing to call the government out when they're not being good enough, because they're frankly not.
Okay. And I think I saw a hand up at the back there. If you could keep it really short.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily bad press at the end of the day, because it's true press, if you know what I mean. So, like, these chicken boxes, that, like, what does it actually do? How is that effective? It's not effective by reading a story. You can do that in a newspaper. As problematic as the media is, like, you can go and read that in a newspaper. But the money they then use on those chicken boxes, which are like placed in places where, you know, predominantly black people and people of colour live, it's political, because they're showcasing that they're obviously, you know, presenting to a certain type of people. They want a certain type of people to read these messages because they're thinking it is them that are doing the crimes. So it is political, and it is technically bad press, yeah, but it's true press at the end of the day. So it should be advertised. So yeah, that's my point on that.
Thank you. And lastly, for the solutions to knife crime, let's look at maybe police numbers. So since 2010, the number of police officers in England and Wales fell by around 20,000. At this year's Conservative Party conference, Sajid Javid announced increase in police numbers by the same amount, plugging the gap which has developed over the past decade. Reports arose earlier this year that police were unable to deal with knife crime due to time spent on policing a national crisis in mental health. We are currently facing knife crime, and mental health epidemics, what should the police focus on? Can we start? Okay, I've got a hand up there.
I think it goes back to the point that I wanted to speak about. I think we really underplayed the role of parents and families, because I think if you look at what the causes are of people getting into knife crime in the first place, I think a lot of it stems from broken families and maybe different types of abuse that happens in the household that leads to youths not wanting to be in the house, which is why the whole youth centres play an important role, is because children are in broken households. They don't want to stay in the household, they want to escape from it, and that leads to them joining gangs, because it gives them a sense of family that they might not have had before. And then when they join gangs, that leads them into knife crime. So I feel like probably the most important factor is looking into helping and protecting youths that are in families that maybe they have maybe not both parents, but one or both are abusing the children, or they're not growing up in a suitable environment. And I think that's where most of the money should be invested into, finding solutions for those children before they get into gangs. And yeah.
I think we had... Okay, so we'll hear from Terrell and then this...
Yeah, I'm just kind of responding directly. I think what you've said is so difficult because, for starters, if the child's always grown up in that environment, how will they know that what they experience shouldn't be acceptable? Another point is also that how do we control how parents treat their children? Should we teach parents how to treat their children? And if so, who does that? Because there are so many different cultures in this world, on this planet. It's unfair for one culture to then decide, oh, we do this, so therefore you do this. This is right. Because there's loads of different rights on this planet. And, I mean, we're all kind of from a Western... We're more Western, whether we're, our heritage is African or heritage is, Irish like yours. It doesn't matter. We're all kind of a bit more Western since we live in England. But is it fair for us to impose our rights, or what we view as our rights, on other people? So that's just kind of... I just wanted to raise that point, really, just because I'm not really sure how... I'm not sure how realistic what you're saying really is.
Okay, the question... I really like...
Sorry.
I really like the conversation here. But what I was asking... And it's very important, you've raised some very important points, but I'm saying we're currently facing the knife crime and the mental health epidemic. What should the police focus on? I heard a voice, but I didn't see a hand. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3. If you keep your answers very short, please. Yes.
Okay, I'll try and keep it short. I think we're creating a bit of a cognitive dissonance in these debates. So we're almost pretending that we don't teach our kids to play with toy guns from a young age. I have one child, he's 18 now, and he knocks about with people from the rough end of the woods, let's say. I used to make sure that he didn't play with toy guns, but when he went to his grandma's, they would get the toy guns out. Same with knives. Same with anything that is designed to kill human beings, right? That's one point. Another point is how we teach our children to do anything. So sitting down on these chairs that we're sitting on, that de-engineer the body, So our knees, our backs, our bowels are being affected by the way we sit. Now, scientists have known this for decades, that this society has got many ills that we take for granted as this is sophisticated society. It's actually backward society, because when you look around the world, you see other people that go to the toilet the right way for the human being, and they're called primitive, right? So the real primitive people in the West who are teaching their children Grand Theft Auto and, murder, 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 rap music, which is about killing black people, nobody else, yeah? All this stuff is allowed to go on. You can say the N-word in a rap song, but you can't really say the N-word to someone's face. Cognitive dissonance. We know it's wrong, we'll let it carry on.
So what's your answer to the question?
The police has never been the answer to anything. Prisons have never been the answer to anything. Look at America, the largest prison population on the planet, right? And the largest population of any country is China, and they've got less prisoners than big old free land of the free America. So, no, I'm not even going to answer that. I'm not going to entertain that, because the police have got nothing to do with this. Yeah, it's about society. It's about us not being so dumb that we go along with things that, you know, we're supposed to vote in. We're supposed to vote in these policies. Are we actually active? I doubt it.
I think we had two hands raised here. Sarah and the lady behind you.
I guess the only thing I can say about the police is training them to lose their unconscious bias in the way that they look for and criminalise black people. And I think it's just about diversifying the police force, getting right training in place so that police are actually becoming aware of the way that they signal out black people for knife crimes, and making that those communities, black communities, work with the police in ensuring that that there isn't that kind of racial bias ingrained within these forces. And that's really important, because the less we criminalise black people, the less criminals that black people become. Because the more that we say, you are a criminal, you are the person that carries a knife, the more they become that. So it's about taking away those racial biases from the police force in the first place.
Just the lady behind you.
Oh yeah, just to answer that question, I was just going to say, like, basically, yeah. I just don't think that they should have to pick whether to prioritise mental health or knife crime. That just seems like, yeah, obviously certain areas have higher levels of knife crime compared to other areas, so in those areas you would expect a bit more emphasis on that. But yeah, I just don't really think it should be a choice. And in an ideal world, like, yeah, going on to what Sarah said, like, if we can sort of unlearn those biases that the police force have, it would be good if we could increase the numbers, but then with increasing the numbers, you know, it can increase problems if they still have all those biases and stuff, so yeah.
That takes us on to our next topic, which is mental health. So we'll be discussing mental health problems, including body image, suicide, and suicide. If you're not comfortable with any of these topics at any point, please feel free to leave the room until we move on to the next topic. Good mental health means being generally able to think, feel, and react in ways that you need and want to live your life. But if you go through a period of poor mental health, you might find the ways you are frequently thinking, feeling, or reacting become difficult or even impossible to cope with. This can feel just as bad as a physical illness or even worse. Mental health problems affect around 1 in 4 people in any given year. They range from common problems such as depression and anxiety to rarer problems such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. In England, women are more likely than men to have the common mental health problem and are almost twice as likely to be diagnosed with anxiety disorders. In 2013, over 6,000 suicides were recorded in the UK for people aged 15 and older. Of these, 78% were male and 22% were female. Are mental health problems stigmatized by African communities?
I feel like this is something that needs to be a bit more amplified in the black community, because especially in places like Africa where people will be going through a lot in their heads, but then because of how they were raised, the parents are always like, this is not mental health, or there's nothing wrong with you, you need to fix up, blah, blah. The parents, without having an ear there, they're actually making it worse. So I feel like there needs to be more put in place in places like, say, Africa and the Caribbean to kind of get people to learn more about mental health and just how bad it can be. Because I think, like myself as well, like I was quite oblivious to it until a couple of years ago. And I feel like that needs to be a bit more amplified in the black community.
Sarah? I don't know if, has anyone else got a point to say on this? Okay.
I would just say I think it's also really important to be intersectional when we talk about mental health, especially within the black community. The reason why maybe that the majority of people we're seeing who are speaking openly about mental health are women is because black males in particular aren't expressing as much about the way that they feel and talking openly about it. You've got that kind of common microaggression, which is like black males don't cry, which is obviously bullshit. And you know, it's about being able to kind of encourage people who do have those other gender stigmas and hyper-masculine stigmas around mental health to also speak out. So I think it's also looking more closely into our intersectional and breaking it down through different groups in like black communities and seeing where the stigmas lie, because it's not easy just to generalize, like, you know, obviously like mental health is a stigma in any community, but it's specific with different genders along with races as well. Mm-hmm. So it's about like having, you know, really important we need more role models who are black role models to speak openly about mental health. You've got that guy off Rezzle Kicks who's like really speaking openly about it at the moment. It's amazing, and we need more role models being like, it's okay not to be okay, and I am a black male and I do cry. So we need more conversations like that.
Okay. The Mental Health Foundation in 2014 found that people who move from one country to another have a higher risk of mental illness. This is especially true for black people who move to predominantly white countries, and the risk is even higher for their children. Even though people from black ethnic backgrounds are slightly less likely than white people to report suicidal thoughts, among the 5 broad ethnic groups, people in the black ethnic group are most likely to have been detained under the Mental Health Act 2017/18, commonly known as being sectioned. And people in the white ethnic group were the least likely to have been detained. Among specific ethnic groups, black Caribbean people had the highest rate of detention out of all ethnic groups. The Mental Health Foundation claimed that this may be because they are reluctant to engage with mental health services. This might be because of significant underrepresentation of staff of black, African, and Caribbean heritage in the psychology and occupational therapy professions, or not enough staff from certain ethnic minority backgrounds, in particular black, African, and Caribbean communities working in mental health services. What do you think are the cultural barriers linked to dealing with mental health? I've got a hand up at the back there.
So me coming from a Nigerian background, talking to a white therapist about my mum beating me and I was a bit peak, it's not a common conversation that they'll have to have and like relate to. So for them to come and try and give me, you know, tips of what I can do and like, you know, tell your mum this maybe, or, you know, sit down with your parents and have this conversation is not something that you can easily do because of, you know, cultural, because of the culture and like the way we act around that. It's not as easy as they perceive. So like to not have, you know, a BAME or even just a black therapist around is something difficult, because you if you were to, you can express your emotion, you can express why, the reasons why, and not have to explain it. They actually already know. So that can make things easier. But typically, if you are to go to a therapist, you're usually referred to, you know, a white therapist. It has been like the most common thing. So it's like you don't want to say everything, and it's not someone that's represented. Again, that representation is another big thing as well, because you see in all these, obviously, like you look at movies and stuff like that as well, and you always see in the movies like, you know, white people being detained or sectioned. I didn't know that stat there. That actually kind of shocked me, because you wouldn't think that black people were the ones that were getting sectioned the most. I actually assumed that would be white people just because of, you know, like the media, because of the films and stuff like that. So that was a shock to me. But yeah, representation is a huge thing in that essence, to, you know, realise what you need to overcome these issues and to get these solutions ahead.
So we have that lady there with the grey here, and then 2 people on the panel. Okay?
I think similar to what you were saying, like if you're going through like mental health issues, it's really hard for you to be able to speak out and speak to someone. And if you have the confidence and you're at that stage and then you go to get some help and it's with someone that you don't feel that will understand you, which is like the most important thing with coming out with things like that, then you're not really going to be able to do that. And I think the statistics of like being detained and stuff is that like people of from black communities, if they're going through things, they don't get help when they need it, and then therefore they get detained when it's too late. Like, that's why they're going through things like that. So that's like an issue that we need to tackle.
Okay. Again, the question is, what do you think are the cultural barriers linked to dealing with mental health?
So I kind of want to reply to the lady in the back who mentioned the white therapist.
Yes.
Because I kind of want to flip the problem itself and say you had a black doctor talking to a white person. I don't think the black doctor would be any less qualified or in any less position to give advice to a person. So I don't think, in my opinion, that it's really like a problem with skin color, because I think health professionals in general, I think, are trained to kind of address problems in a wide range of problems. So I understand your point that maybe the therapist might not relate completely to your experience, but I think they might still be able to give you advice and put you in certain directions. So I think it's really easy to jump onto the, it's like a black and white, or she is a very different person from me, so she doesn't, they don't understand. But I don't think that's entirely true. I think there's people of every background able to understand your experiences and empathize with you, so yeah.
Okay, I saw quite a few hands go up, so I'm assuming that people would like to respond to this comment. So I know I've seen maybe about 6 hands go up, but I'm conscious of the time, and I really would like it if you keep your answers as short as possible, then we can carry on. So then I've heard from you a lot of times. Who wanted to respond? If you just put your hand up, and I'll try and get someone who hasn't spoken just yet. So there's a lady at the back there, and I don't know. Okay. And this one with the denim jacket.
I think we should take into fact where, you know how you said that people come abroad, so they'll come abroad to live in the UK. Take, for example, you have a therapist who's come from abroad and now living in the UK. It's going to be different from, for example, first generation BAME, learning to be a therapist, being qualified, and then becoming a therapist. They will have more of a British understanding, because they've grown up in British society. They know what it means to be among people of the white ethnicity, and they also know, hopefully, what it means to be in the BAME ethnicity. So I don't 100% agree with what you're saying, but yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to extend on what she said. Although they get training on how to respond to the patient's troubles, when it comes to, for example, a black therapist, he has a broad knowledge of how to respond because he has his own experience, and you won't feel micromanaged at the same time when you're trying to explain a situation that a white therapist, on the other hand, will have to think again, and you may have to explain yourself. You just tell it as it is, without holding back. So that's why we do need a high majority of black therapists within the mental health institutions.
Okay, I'm just assuming that a lot of the people will be able to answer this question. That is next. So the next question is, would increase in the number of BME staff encourage you to engage with mental health services if you were struggling with your mental health? Here and this lady there. Very short, please.
Yeah, so I think I actually agree with the fact that I don't think that necessarily we need more BME. I think we just need more staff in general, any staff. I applied for mental health help at the beginning of summer. I said I needed it before I went to uni, and I got it a week before I went to uni. So it literally, basically, I waited so long. As you can say, the police are struggling to deal with mental health right now. Clearly, it's a problem. It's not just a thing of having a black therapist is ideal, but at the same time, you just need someone. We need any kind of staff. I think that's ideal. But you're being very picky. I think we need just more stuff in general.
Okay, I think you had your hand up. Yeah.
I think saying that we need any type of staff is dismissive, and I think it's ignoring that we are living in a time of institutionalized racism. If you're going to a doctor who doesn't look like you, who doesn't understand you, who lacks compassion towards you because you don't look like them, then you're not going to benefit from that at all. So I think we do need more BAME staff, and we need black staff members in particular to deal with these issues and tackle these issues, and I don't think that things in these communities will change until we get that.
Okay. We haven't heard from the panel in a while. If you could just keep it short, please.
I just wanted to say that we didn't answer the last question, and I think that's a very, very important question, which is about our culture. I'm a Nigerian, and it is very difficult to talk to people within your community, whether your parents or people within your community, about mental health issues. And the thing with the mind and the mental health stuff is this, is that if on the first front line of our community, we have people who are understanding, our parents, our faith communities, or our school communities. We have people who support us through that process. Then we wouldn't get to the pandemic level to which it has gotten to. Now, it's very good to talk about mental health professionals, but that is at the point where it has gotten out of hand, where you need help, you know. But if we can curtail it from the point where within our community and our culture, we begin to see this as a very, very big problem for black people, that we need to be more open. We need to leave the hierarchical structure. I'm Yoruba, for example, and I come from a culture where it's very hierarchical. People who are young find it very difficult to express themselves and talk to people who are older. And we need to break down these barriers amongst ourselves before we start talking about treating the epidemic itself and get to the point of even talking about therapists and stuff. And I think that cultural aspect is very important for us to deal with as a community. And that's where we'll be able to solve the problem that we're facing.
Talking about the need for BME staff, I think it's really important to look at the NHS as a whole. So black women, when they go to the NHS, are less likely to be believed about the symptoms that they present because of stigma towards them. Black men are less likely to go to doctors in general. So I think you need to understand the fact that representation is key to everything that we do. And so if you go to a GP and you are seeing people who look like you, then you're more inclined to go there. That's the same for any kind of situation that you find yourself in, because representation is key. So if we start having BME staff within hospitals, within mental health professions, then it becomes easier to go to them, because it's not like you don't get that kind of imposter syndrome that you get when you're the black person or the Asian person walking into a room of white people. And those are nuances that we've got to really appreciate and understand when it comes to talking to people and seeking help. So BME staff would, I think, really expand the conversation around mental health, because it would make people feel more comfortable walking into spaces. It would create kind of NHS safe spaces for BME communities.
Thank you. We do have to move on. So it's just building up a bit more and just looking at something else that can also be of interest. So Oluseni Lewis, known to friends as Seni, who's shown on the screen, died on 4th September 2010 after being restrained by 11 police officers whilst he was seeking help as a vulnerable voluntary patient at Bethlehem Royal Hospital in Croydon. He was admitted early in the evening of 31st August 2010 and had been at the hospital for only a few hours before the incident occurred. At the inquest, the restraint used was deemed to be excessive, unreasonable, and disproportionate. The Mental Health Unit's Use of Force Act 2018, known as Seni's Law, was proposed by his MP Steve Reed following his death. The bill sought to make provision for the oversight and management of appropriate use of force in relation to people in mental health units and similar institutions, and to improve accountability in mental health units. It will ensure staff are given training on the impact of trauma on patients' mental health, as well as on the de-escalation techniques, so that restraint is only ever used as a last resort. People from black and minority ethnic groups are at particular risk of restraint, and this law will help understand why this happens and guard against it. On 1st November 2018, the bill received royal assent and became statute. Do you see a more positive future for Black people who come into contact with mental health services as a result of Seni's law? Yeah.
I think these past three questions all link with each other, because one of the main thing is understanding our various cultures we bring with us. Whether it's first generation or second generation who are born here or brought up here, you're still living within that community, so your culture needs to be understood. Having people working in the NHS mental health service, they need to be understanding your culture to treat you. It looks like a lot of people have been sectioned, not understanding their cultural behavior, and have been locked up, and this is one of the things why Semi's cases come in. And I think this law actually would help people there, but how many of the other doctors would take that into place? It's either having cultural awareness and knowing about everybody's culture, or employing more people who understand this culture, I think, and then only this law can be effective.
Got a hand up here?
Hi, I think that for me there's two key things. In terms of the statistics about people being sectioned, I think there's some interesting stuff to look at there, and it may be anecdotal, but I have very recently, within the past kind of month, come into contact just randomly in the street or on a bus with a lot of people who seem to be incredibly unwell in terms of their mental health, and in some cases in a threatening way, and they were all white people, right? I do wonder whether the statistics in terms of the seriousness of somebody's condition is seen differently depending on your ethnic background, and then the way that you are treated or the initial interventions happen. So we've talked about institutional racism within the police service, within potentially the NHS. I think we have to be aware that those things are going to come into play until this country addresses its institutional racism in general. You know, there has to be a wider conversation that happens in order for those structures to change and in order for people to get appropriate treatment and intervention. There are people walking the streets at the moment that I think need serious intervention. And many of them are not of an African heritage. So, you know, again, it's anecdotal, it's not based on statistic. In my case, I'm just talking about things that I've witnessed recently. But I think that there's some really interesting kind of background in terms of why people of an African or Afro-Caribbean heritage might be being sectioned more, you know, to a higher percentage. And secondly, I think that the question of kind of cultural understanding also comes into play in terms of how people are perceived to be expressing themselves, and again, how people are perceived to be responding to grief, for example, or trauma. And I think that there also needs to be a better understanding of that, as a number of people have said throughout the debate.
Thank you. I think I've got time for one panelist to comment on this.
I think it's all about education, really. Just a few people mentioned about the NHS, and a point that I think is really, really sad is our doctors, our future doctors, aren't taught how certain symptoms present in darker pigmented people. So it's not just mental health that Black people aren't benefiting from. But when it comes to education, it is about education, educating our communities. Like, I know in the Black community, in many deeply religious communities, there's a kind of dismissal of the fact that mental health is clinical. It is just as bad as breaking your leg. And I think if we put some effort and education into getting around that barrier, I think we'd see a lot more positive outputs.
And moving on to faith communities, according to recent research, congregants believe church leaders need to do more to provide a holistic approach to mental health concerns. Participants in the research said that often a culture of spiritualizing and demonizing mental health problems exists in Black majority churches, and emphasized Instead, the need for a culture of acceptance, openness, and destigmatizing mental health problems. According to experts and other service users, faith can help by giving a person with a mental health illness access to a community and give people a newfound purpose and meaning to their lives. Do you think faith has a positive role to play when it comes to supporting mental health? Who thinks faith has a positive role when it comes to supporting mental health? Hands up if you think it has a positive role. If you could put your hands up high, please. And hands up if you don't think faith has a positive role. Okay, so I want to hear from one person who thinks it has a positive role and one person who doesn't think it has a positive role. So let's start with someone who thinks that faith has a positive role when it comes to mental health. If you could put your hands up again. I'll ask the question, do you think faith has a positive role to play when it comes to supporting mental health? I want to hear from, I think this lady with the white top, we haven't heard from you just yet.
I think that if someone is of faith, then it can help them if they feel like they can tap into that to help them with the mental health. I don't think that it should be superimposed on someone who has a mental health problem and for you to then be like, oh, you need to come to Jesus and he'll pray away. It might be something that you feel personally helps you, but it might not be something that helps, that everyone else wants to eat from. Do you know what I mean?
And can I have someone who thinks that faith does not have a positive role when it comes to supporting mental health? I think I saw a couple of hands around this side, but I don't think we've heard from you with the green and the blue scarf.
Hi. I think, as you've just mentioned, that mental health is a clinical issue. Faith could possibly be useful as a coping strategy, but that doesn't apply just to mental health. That would apply also to any sort of physical problem or any struggle that you go through in day-to-day life. So I like the person in the white top said, I do think it is personal and it depends on that person's kind of ideas of faith. But I don't think it's something that you can just resolve, as it is something that's more like deeply entrenched, and it is like a health problem that you need to resolve. It's not something you can kind of convince yourself like, or you can kind of will away almost. Maybe it's something that really needs to be resolved on a medical level.
Would you have time for just one more response to this question?
I was speaking to May. I feel like it's a mixture of a bit of both of them, because I feel like faith within itself, like, is something positive. Like, you know, it kind of gives someone something to believe in, gives someone something positive to kind of look forward to and maintain. But then the people that are kind of trying to exercise their faith, and depends on how someone does it. So like I was saying to May, like May was saying to me that within different kind of religious communities and stuff, you have two very different extremes. Like those that are really, really good and kind of help and happy, and then those that kind of shut down anything that you might bring forward to them. And I feel like more mental health needs to be kind of discussed within different religions and faith. It needs to be discussed more as like, okay, something that can be helped within your faith as well, rather than you have a demon in you, or, you know, being shut down instantly. So
prayer is not the answer.
And just leading on from that point leads me very nicely into my next question. So what can faith leaders do to stop the stigmatization of mental health?
Sorry, I was just saying, like, our religious communities need to advocate that. Prayer is wonderful and it is really good in consoling oneself, but it is not the answer because it is a clinical issue. Yes, pray for it, but don't pray on it. Seek help and pray.
Just to kind of echo and add on to that, like, just because you're praying on it, praying that this issue goes away, your prayer might be answered in a different way. Like, you might be praying like, I want this mental health to go away, and the way God might answer your prayer is by bringing someone to you to kind of help you cope with it and deal with it. So.
Thank you. And there's a lady at the back with the orange hoodie, I think.
I think like religion links to, I think, a cultural issue as well. Like some people think that it's a sin to like have a mental health, and like it's a sin not to feel a type of way. So I think people need to be encouraged that it's okay to like not, it's okay to have that mental health, that they're not sinning against God or against their religion, and they should be encouraged within the church and within leaders that they're not sinning against God, but it's an all right thing to have the mental health.
Okay. And just looking at the time, of course, as I said at the beginning, we're just scratching the surface, and I know we've got a lot of opinions and a lot of things, and I know we've heard very interesting opinions, but I'd really like to focus on some of the other sections within the same topics. So I'd just like you just to put your hands up if you use social media. When I was looking at this question, I was like, no, I don't. I was just like, actually, I'm on WhatsApp a lot of the time, so my hand has to be up. So keep your hands up if you think social media has a positive impact on your mental health. Okay, so of those who still had your hands up, and I'd like to hear from someone who we haven't heard from just yet, why do you think that social media has a positive effect on your mental health? I don't think we've heard you speak.
I think that it can have a positive and a negative effect. And I think that people don't believe that they're in control of their social media when they are. You can choose what to see and what not to see. And if you can like realize that you have that control, like you will see the positive benefits. There are Instagram pages that like post positive things. If you're a Christian, you'll get daily Bible quotes. There is positivity in social media. You just have to look for it and not just accept the negativity that you see, because you can remove it.
Okay, we'll hear from 1, 2, 3. I think the lady there. Yeah.
I just had to say something. Social media has had very great impact on my mental health, like positively, because, like he said, my pages on Facebook is super filtered. I control what I see there, you know, so I choose to see the comedians that sort of inspire me. I get like very inspirational quotes daily, do you know what I mean? So that keeps me all hyped up, ready for my day, if that was the first thing I looked at in the morning, which most times is not, you know, but whenever I do, it's like I listen to great music through social media and stuff like that. There was a time I had to pause one media page because all they were posting was about vets and things, and I noted it started, you know, getting me scared of even leaving my house. Do you know what I mean? You know, so I had to pause the page, and I think we need to be aware of the fact that we can control our media spaces so much. Learn how to use it. Learn how to say no to things, because you've got the power. You open the account anyways.
Very, very quickly.
Oh, hi. So I'm a bit conflicted on it, like I'm 50-50. I use social media for work, so I use it to talk about mental health now and then, especially from the Black perspective. But a few months ago, I have to, like you said, you have to sometimes cut people off, and you do have the ability to do so. And I think a lot of people may be like, oh, why did you block me, or why aren't you viewing my story? And it's kind of like you, in some cases, do have the power to be able to say, like, I want to make my social media positive. And I do think there can be a lot of things that come from it that are good. Like you can find friends who are going through things similar from you in a completely different country, and people who you may not be in a, like for some people maybe in a community where they have no one around them who is sympathetic to mental health, and just finding millions of people online who are going through what you can through hashtags and stuff like that. But at the same time, it can be negative also. Like even though I can block people if I wanted to, sometimes people you follow may retweet something. Like every now and then I do try to make sure people I follow on Twitter are the same ideologies as me, but now then you will get someone who retweets something homophobic or racist, and you can't control that, and it still will have a negative impact on your mental health. If you go on Twitter, they have the For You thing, things that are trending, you can't control that. So it's kind of like the only power we do have is to kind of limit the time we have and having things set up around us if we do see something traumatic or triggering.
Okay.
But overall, it depends on how you use it, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, I think you had your hand up. Do you still want to say something? If you keep it very short for me, please.
Yeah. Just one point is that social media like Snapchat, it's just a way for people to make sure they're not alone. Like, especially growing up with mental health issues, people can feel like they're alone physically, like no one's there for them. Social media is a way for friends to be there. Social media is a way for you to connect with people going through similar things to you, and that can advise you and keep you going and keep you strong, but not have to physically be there for you. And without that, I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to get through stuff that they've gone through. And things like Twitter as well, people that you won't see in the timeline, people go through it all over the country, and you follow people of your own age range. So it's just a great way for you to feel like there are other people around you. You're never going to be alone.
Okay. Thank you for that. So anxiety, loneliness, and FOMO, stemming from increased use of social media, have been frequently cited amongst young people for mental health problems they face. The Mental Health Foundation has reported that 1 in 5 UK adults have worried about their body image because of what they have seen on social media. So I'm just looking for 2 responses to my next question. What should social media sites do to tackle this body image epidemic? And if you could keep it very, very short, I'd be very appreciative. So what should social media sites do to tackle this body image epidemic?
That might be a difficult one. I remember writing an article a few years ago about body image concerns around women. And, the thing is, there are loads of fake pictures with all the filters now, and Photoshop, so people post pictures. So is it possible to ask the sites, do not post fake pictures of you or something? I don't know if that could work. For women, that's a huge, huge issue. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, can we just hear from the audience and then we'll come back to the panel? I saw some hands up. Okay, so we'll hear from you in the black and then from Sarah, please.
I think that we can ask social media sites to put a universal ban on things like skinny teas and things that they're selling to mostly young girls and younger generation, and most often than not, women that are selling these teas are not actually using them. So it's giving these young girls an unrealistic view of what can happen when you actually use these skinny teas, which are mostly laxatives, and you don't actually get the effects, the plastic surgery effects that these women that are selling them have had in order to attain the bodies that they have. And I think social media is not a place where these types of medicines should be advertised and sold. So I think a ban on that would be a good start.
Okay. Thank you.
I really want to refocus this into kind of black communities, because we can talk quite generally about what social media does, but if we're talking specifically about why we're here and talking about black issues, and I guess for me, if we're talking about social media and positive body images, I want to see more black bodies on social media and black people promoting natural hair, their kind of whole culture on social media. I think a lot of the time what I get frustrated about is like blackfishers and culture vultures kind of appropriating black culture on Instagram, and those are the kind of people who kind of gain a lot of traction and likes, and those people that black girls, I guess, feel like they're silenced in a kind of, or feel invisible because you don't have any black role models like being able to kind of promote your culture. So for me, body positivity in the black community is about promoting black women and black men and black people on social media that we can all relate to and aspire to. So.
Very quickly, Terrell, please.
Just to respond to your question, I personally think social media should do nothing. I feel that
the reality of social media is, it is what it is. I know that's a bit kind of blunt, but it is what it is. You choose to follow who you follow. Your social media is what you make it. So also in response to what Sarah was saying as well, I don't see any of those, what would you say, blackfishes? I don't see any of those on my social media. I follow who I want to follow. So I see a lot, like my social media is just full of black people. Like I'm very happy with my social media. Like, I see a lot of beautiful natural bodies. I see a lot of beautiful products. I follow who I want to follow. So I feel that it's kind of just up to you. Maybe the problem is, I think the problem is just education, really. I don't think social media should do anything because that almost destroys the point of social media. It's a place where you can put all you want out there. If you want to sell your fake products to kill people, that's bad, obviously. But people should be educated to know that they're bad products. You shouldn't necessarily make social media ban them. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So that's kind of my perspective on it. It's a bit kind of aggressive, but yeah.
Okay. Sorry, just because of time, we're going to just jump into this one. So if we're looking at universities, so as reported by The Guardian in July 2018, suicide rates among students in England and Wales have risen gradually over the past 10 years. From 2008 to 2018, there were over 1,000 student deaths by suicide. Of these, there was a significant gender disparity. 66% were men and 34% were women. According to the Office of National Statistics, the year leading up to July 2017 saw a total of 95 student deaths by suicide, which equates to 1 every 4 days. What can universities do to help students with mental health problems? Yeah, we'll start from the panel.
I think it's, first of all, it's important to acknowledge the work that universities have been doing recently with mental health and students, but I think it's also about us as consumers of university understanding that we're technically buying a product from universities, and it's about us kind of pushing them to be well, we won't come there if you don't have good mental health services, and I think that will push them towards kind of widening their welfare systems, getting therapists and things like that, because it's all well and good with universities getting things like therapy dogs, but I think it's if you're not having the proper channels in which students can be I'm struggling, and they can be okay, so here's who you can talk to, here's what you can do about your academics, and here's what you can do about this, then you're not really getting, you're not really doing enough if there's not enough to go around for everybody who needs the services.
We've got 2 hands up or 3 hands up in the audience. And again, as the mic is going to, so that's 1, 2, 3. As the mic is going around, I'll just repeat the question again. What can universities do to help students with mental health problems?
I was just going to say, I think that it's also highlighting that it's an important part of university is your mental health, and making sure that people know that it's just as important as your academic work, or it's just as important as other aspects of university life, and that it is something that people can talk about with each other. And I think it's particularly a problem in kind of older, more prestigious universities. They tend to kind of dismiss it as an issue, and I think that's where I think that more kind of modern universities are a lot better, but they're a lot better with using mental health services than a lot of the older universities, because they don't view that they need it, because people, kind of what you were saying, they know that people are going to come to the university anyway, so kind of don't necessarily see it as something that they need to offer.
Okay. I think the lady with the grey top, and then there was the one in the black, and then the gentleman here at the front.
I can't speak for all universities, but Newcastle in particular, I think a big issue is just advertisement, because when you were saying stuff about counselling and things like that, Newcastle actually has a lot of these services, but people just don't know that they're there. If you look for them, you will find them, but they need to be advertised. It needs to be maybe when we first start university in Freshers Week or something, people are told exactly where to go and where to find it. Because for many places, these things are there, just people just don't know that.
Okay. Again, the question is, what can universities do to help students with mental health problems?
Yeah, so again, like I know that like Newcastle itself has quite a good like well-being system in place. Well, can for some people have a good well-being system in place, but I know it can be kind of daunting to go to these places as well. So one thing that recently I think is actually quite a big thing for me anyway was being a peer mentor and realizing that people can come to me and ask these questions, because I've had 2 people already who are in first year come to me and talk to me about their mental health and what they're struggling with in terms of that. I've directed them to little things, and I've had like a simple coffee session just to chill and chat with them, which is nice. So like me being that kind of like person that they can go to and actually just ask the questions for me to direct them to go and do something, or simply have that conversation and know that someone on their level they can talk to is there, rather than someone so professional as like the student services and the wellbeing centres that we have, which might again seem quite daunting, is kind of a nice aspect. So university doing things like that where people can relate to. So a peer mentor in that sense is a positive thing.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like the uni just need to invest. From my experience at Newcastle, I applied through to try and get some counselling, and there just isn't enough funding in there. There isn't enough counsellors, and the services when you do eventually get to the front of the queue, the services that they provide are not sufficient. They don't help. I wasn't offered the counselling because they said they didn't have a counsellor that could deal with the specific thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm not going to go into that topic, but the fact that wasn't available when there are definitely loads of students that would have gone through something similar, it just shows that there's nowhere near enough money that's put into it. And then on top of that, the people that are offered the service, they're given 5 counselling sessions, 5. That 5 hours spread out 1 hour a week for 5 weeks is not going to do anything for anyone. That's a scratch in the surface. There's really a surface. There really is nowhere near enough money that's been put into Newcastle specifically, mental health for students, and that's the first thing, is bringing in more counsellors and expanding the system they have in place, offering more sessions than just 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Keep it short, please.
Yeah, just as short as you can.
I feel just to kind of echo that, universities need to just do more. What I mean by that is just literally they're very good at talking about there's this problem happening, we have this is happening, blah blah, but then they're talking about it just for the sake of getting media attention, but then they're physically not doing anything about it. So I feel like universities just need to actually make an attempt and actually do more instead of just talking about it.
Okay. And just picking up from your point, but just leading on to the next question, hands up if you think there is enough support available specifically aimed at men. So there's not enough support specifically aimed at men. Men in general, maybe just men in general when we're looking at mental health. So of course, I'm not saying specifically, I don't know what particular issue that you wanted to talk about, but then I'm just saying, okay, he said he wasn't able to get the assistance that he needed because they didn't have that particular thing. They didn't have someone who had that expertise to deal with that. So then I was just asking if we think there is enough support specifically aimed at men. No. That was an obvious one. Okay. So I know we haven't really gone into so much depth into this topic and everything like that. As I said, it's just an opportunity for us just to scratch the surface and continue these conversations within our own circles. And mental health can be a difficult subject, but it's important to remember that there is help available. I know we've spoken of some issues as to actually accessing that help, but it's also important to know that there is help available, and we can also speak to our GPs, our friends, family trained therapists, or even student services. So I think it's maybe a resource that maybe we don't always tap into. I mean, our friends are maybe the closest people to us while we're at university, so it's always important to maybe tap into that, because they have a different understanding maybe to the way our parents might view mental health, and that might be something that is helpful to us. So moving on to the last topic for tonight, which is breaking into elite professions. So the question in there says, what does it mean to be elite? So what I want us to do in this next question that I'm going to ask, I'll ask the question, and what I'll ask you, if you've got an answer, please just put your hand up and just say just one profession. So the question is, what would your parents say an elite profession is? So those with the mics running around, I don't think there'll be enough time. So if you could just shout as loud as you can. So put your hands up and tell me, what would your parents say an elite profession is? Hands up, and then I'll just point. If you put them as high as you can, then I'll point, and if you could just shout out. At the back there? Doctor? Engineer? Lawyer? Doctor? So we've had doctor twice. Doctor, engineer. Did we have lawyer? Accountant? Finance? Politician. Any more for any more? Okay, so what would you say an elite profession is? Teacher. Anyone else? Sorry. Sewage worker. Sewage worker. An activist? Something in healthcare? Okay, not just doctor, but anything in healthcare. A nurse? Architect. A banker.
I think it depends how you define elite. But
it depends how you define elite. Thank you for leading me on to my next point. So, when we talk about elite professions, we mean roles with the highest prestige and wealth, which are among the most coveted in society, or roles with substantial power and influence over people's lives, which make the decisions that affect us all day to day. So, what do you think is the most important factor in getting an elite job? And we'll need to put our hands up now so the mic runners can come to us again. So what's the most important factor in getting an elite job? Sorry, just a minute. Who's got the microphone?
I was just going to say, I think a lot of the time, like, it is just connections and who you know. Like, if you look at all the people who are in, like, the higher sort of upper echelons of society, a lot of the time they're not necessarily the most qualified. It's just that they knew someone who could get them in that job, really. So, yeah.
So connections.
I think.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we could keep it very, very short, just tell me what you think is the most important factor in getting an elite job.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. There's assimilation and complacency. If you're happy with the way the world is being run, then you will go for an elite job, what is currently seen as an elite job. The sewage worker, to me, is an elite job because without the sewage being, adequately, done, everyone's going to die. So to me, that should be at the top of the pyramid. We've got an upside-down pyramid.
Okay, thank you. This lady here.
Determination and resilience.
Yep.
Like.
At the back there.
Access to education.
And at the front here, I think. Okay, access. I think a couple of them. I think you've just got the mic. You have to say something.
I think it's an issue of background. So, like, where you go to school, then who you meet at your schools, and then who gives you access to, like, things, and then who you meet at university, and, like, what access that gives you. So it's all about like the background of where you're from and what you can get to.
The environment that you're in as well. Okay.
Just to echo off of that,
Yeah.
your accent, the clothes that you wear, the name that you have, because that first name that you put down on that application form, you're already at a disadvantage if you don't fit a specific category that they're looking for.
Okay. Tolu, and then Claire, very quickly, please.
Algorithms.
Sorry? Algorithms.
Yep. Yep. Yes, LinkedIn use algorithms to match you with jobs, and some people built those algorithms.
Yes.
As a machine learning actually is running how people are recruited now, although they come with implicit biases, but it's algorithms.
Okay.
I tell you what, a friend of mine got a job because she switched up her first name. Just like her first name was a long African name, so she switched it up to Lisa and then changed. Sorry, I mean, no offense here. Lisa is a great name, but that was literally the politics she played to get into the job. Then her surname, she took her father's first name, which was English. So she had 2 English names. So when she was called for the interview, she got in. They were like, "Oh, we thought you were a different person." And literally, they said that to her. But they couldn't back out, so she got the job, and that led to other jobs. So she was sharing her experience. She was like, if you want to get the job, think about dropping your real name and get a second name for yourself, because that will make things easier. So connections, your name, rebrand yourself, that might help, because that's what we call it, rebranding.
Okay.
That shouldn't have to be the case, obviously, though. It shouldn't have to be the case, but to get into that, sometimes you have to do that.
So would you say that's the most important factor?
I wouldn't say that's the most important factor.
And what is?
Well, determination
Okay.
is the most important factor for us.
Yes.
Determination.
Okay.
About how to do well in life.
Go to university and work hard.
Persistent hard work. Through hard work. If you get a good degree from one of the best universities, you can make it to the top. Turns out that's a bit of a lie. Sam Friedman is literally the Don when it comes to the link between class and top jobs.
In our data nationally, what we can see is that about 1/3 of the population come from working class backgrounds, but about 10% of that group will make it into elite occupations.
10% of working class people will make it into elite occupations.
Yeah. And even when those from working class backgrounds make it into Britain's top professions, they go on to earn on average 16% less than their colleagues from more privileged backgrounds.
Okay, so that is an excerpt from BBC's recently premiered landmark documentary, How to Break into the Elite. It is about an hour long and it is available on iPlayer if you're interested in watching more. So it follows Amol Rajan, who made it from a relatively humble beginnings as a son of an Indian immigrant to a career in the media, becoming the youngest editor of a UK broadsheet at age 29. Amol learned that when it comes to city jobs, many employers are looking for candidates with polish. The most common career paths denote people staying in the same class position as their parents started in. People from upper middle class origins have about 6.5 times the chance of landing an elite job compared to people from working class backgrounds. BAME people are far less likely to come from privileged backgrounds than their white counterparts, meaning that access to elite professions for people from BAME backgrounds is more restricted than people from white backgrounds. So my question to you then is, why do you think it is more difficult for people from less privileged backgrounds to make it into elite professions? Terrell?
Sorry. Yeah, this topic is quite personal to me, I think, because I went to a private school in London. So all of my friends had a completely different upbringing to me. So they pretty much knew what they were doing. So, for example, right now, I went to a few banking events. I've been lucky enough to network with a few people in high positions in banks. But my friends from my private school, they were doing that from 12, 13. And it's just the mindset they've been growing up into is why they've kind of already been in this direction. So they're already ahead of someone like me, for example, who's only doing this at 18, when I was 18. So I think it's kind of the mindset you're growing up within. That's the main factor towards it. That's what I say, yeah.
I saw some other hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, please.
I think that education is definitely one of them. People in who are working class, they may not all of them, but they may not pay attention in school or get the best education in their schools because education it's not at a good standard across the country, for one, and then two, drive. You echo what you see in your parents. So if you see your parents working class jobs and they're comfortable with it and they don't push you to do anything more than that, or you might not feel inspired to do the same. And then also going on from Terrell's point about growing up with kids that were doing, I would say, big movements for a young age, that's because their parents have connections. And if you're not aware of the trade or the industry secrets or how to get into certain places because your parents don't know, who are you going to get the information from unless you start to be educated on those topics? So unless people, or unless the government, I'd say starting in schools, start educating people on how to break into those topics and standardizing education, that it's pretty good on a universal level, which is pretty hard. I mean, then you're not going to see any big changes, in my opinion. But yeah.
Okay. I think you had your hand up.
I was just going to say it can even be something, obviously there are huge systemic inequalities, but it can even be things that are small as kind of mannerisms and cultural norms. If you come from a different culture, or the manners of people who work in these, companies and who are in the upper elites, they're maybe not something that are kind of taught to you in younger, because why would they? But these are things that people are brought up with, and they know how to kind of even communicate to other people how they're supposed to talk or how they're supposed to present themselves in certain situations that in just other minds just aren't really socialised into people because it's not part of something that is deemed in a way that it's important.
Okay. And we had 2 panel members, and then if we've got time, we'll hear from you. Yes?
Blanked completely there. I like to always think that everything is kind of about access and privilege. Mm-hmm. So on the thing that you were saying about how you went to school with kids who were going to these things from 12, 13, that's a privilege that they have access to those things. So if you go to a state school and your parents work in something kind of normal standard, then you're not going to be meeting any big bankers or big lawyers to get you into those firms to get work experience there, and you don't have anything on your CV, then you can't go to a new law firm and be like, well, daddy got me into law work experience at A, B, C, D, E, and so when it comes to it, if they're looking at someone's CV who's got previous law experience and looking at yours where I did a law degree, they're obviously going to get into the person that's got previous law experience, and they only got to those things because of the access and privilege that they have.
Okay. Do you still have something to say? Yeah? Yeah, I think... Did you want to say anything? No.
I think the main thing that affects how, if you can get into elite jobs, as you say, is class and money. There was this quite interesting thing I learned in one of my modules. It's called, I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically what it is there are certain levels, and it starts with basic instinctual needs like food, shelter, and everything like that. And then once you're in a situation where you're secure with that need, you then move up into another one. So when you're in like a higher class, like middle class, upper middle class, you don't have to worry about certain things, such as making sure you have money for food and rent and everything. So when you don't have to worry about that, you can then move on to other things, such as education. And so like, for example, I, at like 17, 18, I had to work so that I could afford to like help my nan, because I lived with my nan. So I had to work while I was doing my A-levels, which means that like I had less time to focus on getting my grades because I was having to do other things such as work to earn money. And then obviously that affects stuff, because while I'm working, there's someone whose maybe mum and dad earn about like 80K a year or above that doesn't have to do that same thing. So the time that I'm putting into working, because I have to, they're able to be at home revising, or their parents can afford for them to have a personal tutor. And like, so money really affects it. When you have money, you can get more money. Like, the more money you have, the more money you can earn. When you don't have a lot of money, like, all you're doing is trying to get money so you can survive. So you don't have time to invest into education to earn more money. So I feel like class really is a deciding factor, and that's why so many people from working class backgrounds struggle to earn more money, because they're having to focus on other stuff over that. Yeah.
Did you have something? Okay. So there's a lady at the back there, and then this gentleman here.
Hi, I think elite is supposed to represent the top, the best of the best. And I think we can say that a lot of people in those positions now, yeah, they have their parents who got them in there and et cetera, but their parents and their families have been in these positions for years and for generations. And I think a lot of like black and minority ethnics, a majority of us are like second generation, right? Our parents have come from a different country. They've started at the very bottom. And we've all been taught from a very young age, if you're black, you have to work twice as hard. And I don't think if you're born at the bottom now, it doesn't mean you can't go far. Our parents have already worked hard to get us into the position that we're all here, we're all at university now. We've got that education, and it's our responsibility to work twice as hard, and we can still get to be the elite if we work just as hard. Okay, it's a problem in society that has not made it easier for us, but that's just the way it is, and we've got to work hard. I don't think it's anybody else's responsibility to make it easier for us. If you deserve to be at the top, you should work hard to get there.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got lots of examples in our history of people who achieve great things. Like the highest educated president of any country in history, I think, was Robert Mugabe. You know, like African people have been breaking records throughout slavery, and before that, you know, through ancient times. We built the pyramids, you know, against all odds. So, you know, to claim that there are, you know, different sets of circumstances now, you know, maybe we're facing greater challenges, I think it's a bit of a cop-out, if you don't mind me saying. Yes, you know, people have to work. I had to work to get through college and all that. Didn't do me a lot of good, but I'm quite successful now in what I am doing because I invested myself in what I am doing now. It's about how you invest your energy and how you have a vision for what it is you're trying to achieve and how you go for that. But it also does help to have knowledge of people who look like you, who have achieved greatness. So I think the biggest deficit in our community, in the African, whether you're mixed or you know, indigenous African or whatever, Caribbean, whatever, we're all African people, is to look up to other African people, not to Bill Gates, but to Mansa Musa, who's the richest man who's ever lived, yeah? Not to, you know, however many examples you have, computer scientists and all that. We've got dark-skinned computer scientists. We've got dark-skinned medical doctors that are absolutely brilliant in history, and we're not talking about them. We're still accrediting the people that are continually oppressing us. So we need to change our own narrative. We need to be in control of our own narrative. And this to me, this event is about dark-skinned people actually, you know, consolidating what it is they know and going forward from there. So.
Okay, so my next question is it the government's responsibility to level the playing field for people from less privileged backgrounds? I just need 2 responses, one at the back there and...
Well, yeah, because it obviously stems from systemic racism and it stems from institutional racism. So for us to get to those levels where we want to be is to be given the opportunity. So, you know, how they're introducing in like the police force, they're hiring, or like it's going around saying they're hiring more people of BAME ethnicity because they want to see more representation in those institutions. It's like we need those opportunities because it's never been, it's like, yeah, we have to work twice as hard. It's like always that thing, but it shouldn't have to be the case that we should work twice as hard. These opportunities should come to us, you know, without us having to break our back to do this. It's like when I was looking for my placement, I was denied opportunities from 2 places because they said that there were people before me that done unpaid internships and got the experience beforehand. And I was like, well, how can you do an unpaid internship without, how would I get to this unpaid internship if I can't put money on my Oyster card to get there kind of thing? So it's these kind of issues where if you don't have that space to go to get there, it's hard to actually achieve what you want to achieve. That's about it.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
So the question is it the government's responsibility to level the playing field for people from less privileged backgrounds?
So, yes and no. No, it is not the government's responsibility to do that, but it is the government's responsibility to take out anything that's a hindrance. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, like, I hate the pity me mentality. I do think that like anybody of any colour, if you're working hard, you've worked hard to be there, then you should reap the rewards. And it's something like and if anybody gets to a certain position, you've done so, hopefully, so you can provide a better life for your children. And that is the mentality as a human race that we have. So I don't want to take away from people who've worked very hard for whatever they have, but I do want to facilitate avenues so that people from less advantaged backgrounds, people who don't have parents who are lawyers and can access those same spaces.
Thank you. Lastly?
Yeah, I completely agree with what May said, but I feel like we're not really talking about solutions, but I feel like what we need to do as a community is we need to bring each other up as we go up. Like, I think that's the most important thing because, is this my mic? I don't know. But yeah, I think that in regards to trying to level the playing field, I understand where it's coming from, but I personally don't agree with it for the simple fact that I've come from, not the bottom, but I have not come from like a place where I should be here right now at all. I've kind of worked my way into a private school, thank God, I don't know how I did that. Got to uni, thank God again, and I'm here. And for me, it's like I've worked so hard. When I get older, I don't plan to be unsuccessful, I plan to be very successful. So I plan to have, yeah, exactly. My kids, they will be well off. Like, they will have a blessed life. That's just my mindset. So for me, it's like, when I work that hard and I reach that position, is it then fair for other people who kind of have not worked as hard as me, coming from the same position as me? Because I've had loads of friends in my position who are now doing things that I can't really talk about. And I don't, and I don't personally think that the government needs to, I think they do need to do something, and I agree with what May said in terms of they need to remove the hindrances. But in terms of leveling the playing field, that's a topic, that's a whole nother topic, really.
Yeah.
But I feel like we just need to elevate each other. We need to bring each other up. If I'm at the top, I'm bringing my man then with me. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
And looking at educational backgrounds, so about 7% of the children in the UK attend private schools. Compare this to 70% of judges, over half of the most senior servants in government, 44% of the Sunday Times Rich List, 39% in the elite professions overall. There is clearly some staggering inequalities in top jobs. At this year's party conference, the Labour Party voted to support the abolition of private schools. How might abolishing private schools increase the likelihood of people from underrepresented groups breaking into the elite?
So I think it's really important to understand that private schools create a fundamental inequality in our society. So I feel like there's always this discussion when people talk about abolishing private schools, somehow you're just getting rid of them and everyone's going to it's not going to do anything. But so things about private schools is they're excluded from certain taxes, certain things. So they're charities. So the money that people pay into private schools isn't subject to tax regulations, which means that they're able to fund things better. But if we took that money out, so things that other schools do, they're not charities, so they're subject to tax. If we start spending that money and infusing that money into all schools and all education to create situations in which places that are lower socioeconomic can have smaller classroom sizes. So why can't all schools have class sizes of 15, 20 for more direct learning? Abolishing private schools will mean that people are in the position to kind of get that same level of teaching, that same level of education. Why does one person deserve a better education than another person? I just fundamentally don't understand that one.
Okay. We've got quite a few hands up. I don't think we've heard from you. I think you put your hand up a while ago.
I actually don't agree with abolishing private schools, just because I feel like if you've worked hard all your life and you've got all of this money and you want this better life for your children, I feel like there's nothing wrong with wanting to send them to have a better quality of education. But at the same time, I understand the whole access thing, and I think that we shouldn't the problem shouldn't be just abolish private schools and then it will make it better for everyone else. I think if you just raise the standard of education in the other schools so that it matches the students that go to private schools, and that will be a better solution than just saying, okay, there's no more private schools and that's that, everything's fair now.
Okay. I know he had his hand up and then you can speak up.
Just a response to that, I also didn't agree with abolishing private schools. But I wouldn't say that it makes much sense to, raise the level of all schools to private schools, because then at that point, what are people who are sending their kids to private school paying for? It doesn't make much sense. So I would say that the reason I don't think that you should abolish private schools is because, if I want my child to have the best education, I'm gonna pay for him to go to a school where I know he's gonna get certain grades and do well in life. However, I do think we should just elevate the level of normal schools. But the problem comes to where does the standard lie in education, and how do you judge that in the first place? And then even then, people are still going to be complaining that there's a disparity in the education between standard schools and private schools. So yeah.
Okay.
So I don't agree with abolishing private schools either, because I don't think it really necessarily directly solves the problem of the fact that some of our schools are trash and they need to raise the standards of those. I think what should happen is we should definitely revoke their charity status, because they are not a charity. And I think we should aim to raise our standards in education so that people who are putting their children into private schools aren't just paying for better grades, but they're maybe doing a social action where they don't want to burden the government pot. They want to take that responsible choice because they have extra money. I wish it would be that choice and not the choice of this is a greater school with better facilities and better teachers and smaller class sizes.
I think the reality of the situation is you can't... okay, for starters, I think abolishing private schools is just wrong. I don't think you should do that. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think the idea of raising all other schools to that level is just so idealistic. It's just not impossible. Private schools are there because the kids paid loads of money. I think at my school they paid 16K a term, crazy money. I was lucky to go for free. I don't know how that happened, but so I think abolishing private schools doesn't really make much sense. Logically it makes sense, but I just think in reality it doesn't make sense. And raising all other schools to that level is basically impossible for the simple fact that it's just government funded. So unless the government puts all their money into schools and nothing else, we've had a whole bunch of conversations about knife crime, putting money into stuff like that, into youth clubs. That can't happen. can't put money into mental health because you put it into schools. That can't happen. So in reality, I personally think what needs to happen is they need to make more systems for people like me where I managed to get in for free. They need to make a system where more kids who are, I don't want to say deserving, but are deserving. So like almost like how grammar schools are. I think, are grammar schools still around? I think some of them are, yeah, some are going, but I think a system in private schools where they treat it like a grammar school. So it's like half the kids come in by paying, and the other half come in just because they're, you know, very, like they've been selected. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. No, but it's not just about being smart, but yeah, pretty much.
It's about being articulate and just those other things.
I apologise.
I'm just looking at the time. I know, okay, if you can keep it very, very short, because literally we've got like 3 minutes left on this particular point.
I was just going to say very briefly, it's what type of education. So whether it's private school or government school or whatever it is, Finland's got the best education system on earth. Why is that? Why are we not changing the British education system so that our people can actually, you know, aspire to better with creativity, with music, with the arts, and all of those things being highly prized? The British education system was designed to create obedient workers. We want creative people that are going to change the world.
Mine is a question for you, really. I'm not answering the question. You gave the statistics that 7% of them went to private school and they all had these top jobs. How many of them are from black and minority ethnic? Because I need to know that statistics to answer these other questions, whether private schools need to be closed or not.
I don't have that data in front of me here. So, of course, I understand your point. Okay.
Well, I don't know if private schools should be abolished. I don't know the answer to that. But I think it's easy to say, like, oh, if a parent wants to pay for their child to go to private school, they have the right to do that. But the fact is that don't all parents want the best education for their children. And the fact is that not all of them have the choice to do that because they can't afford it. So that's just what I want to say.
So looking beyond education, academics Sam Friedman and Daniel Lorison argue people from upper middle class backgrounds don't just benefit from a good education, but also a form of social conditioning that allows them to seamlessly fit in elite professions. They claim this explains why when people from underprivileged backgrounds get into elite education, they still earn less. This can range from being confident to having the right clothes to wear, picking the right foods in restaurants, and easily being able to converse on a range of subjects with colleagues. Should looking and acting the right way be important when getting an elite job? I've seen a hand go up at the back there.
Hi. More than having an answer to this, I'm just really interested in this question. And I haven't thought of this before from a race perspective. I have thought about this a lot from a gender perspective. So, for example, as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, changing your name to fit in with that kind of elite idea. I've considered doing that, like, using like the first initials of my name. So when I'm writing emails, it's like I'm a man. Like, should you change the other, can you control others' perception of you and capitalize on that? I don't know, because on the one hand, that means you're beating the system. You're using the deficiencies and the inequalities of the system to beat it. And I think that's quite admirable if you can do that. But on the other hand, does that mean that you're reinforcing this idea of what it is to be elite or this like higher status? And I think ultimately the goal is to be who you are and have respect solely as a result of that. So just to give my own story, because like I can't really relate to a lot of the things we've talked about tonight, but this whole summer I worked in a law firm and I didn't wear makeup, I didn't wear heels, I didn't always laugh at the jokes. I really tried to fit into this like almost masculine expectation of how you succeed in law.
And I don't want to be like that. I want to be as feminine as I want and still taken seriously. And I think the same thing applies to any sort of social division. You should be whoever you are and be able to succeed in your field on that basis and not have to fit into society's expectations. But for now, maybe you have to, you know.
So we have time for just 2 more responses to this question, and I'll repeat the question again. Should looking and acting the right way be important when getting an elite job?
I don't think there's a right way to look almost, but I think, yeah, using the word right is it's iffy territory, because, like, what is the right way to look? But, like, I know that, like, it can be important. So I have friends who went to private schools, and when we were all applying to university, they got like special classes almost on how to like beat the Oxbridge like interviews. They were told how to act, what to say, and how to like do your Oxbridge interview to better your chances of getting in. Whereas like we were not given those same things. So I think there is something to be said about like learning how certain professions and certain groups do things, even if you're not completely assimilating and changing yourself. There are certain like nuances that would be good to have. So like the way that I would sometimes speak to my friends is not the same way that I would speak in a place of work, but I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing, because those are 2 separate kind of situations and like things that I find myself in.
I mean, she took some of the words literally out of my mouth. In studying culture, one of the things, you know, I did learn a lot from that experience was understanding cultural nuances within a situation is super important, you know. So, yeah, it is important to understand how to act in whatever situation you find yourself. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are changing who you are, you know, but understanding it, you know, might help you get some acceptance within that situation.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. So I'm just going to speak from like 2 experiences. So my mum, she works in the council back in Essex, and she's worked there for about 10 years. And she's always worn like straight hair. We have this thing called code switching. So how you talk, you'll talk, I guess, to define it, white. You know, you might speak, everyone would compliment her, say you speak very eloquent, you have the Queen's English, all that kind of stuff. And she did that for about 10 years, and only recently has she started to kind of feel more confident to wear her natural hair. And she is a minority in the workplace. She's like one of 5 black women in the whole council. And, you know, people will view her differently and treat her differently. And my experience of it was growing up in a predominantly white school was people would treat me differently, even as hard as I tried to assimilate with white culture. And there was this whole thing saying, if you don't talk right, if you don't wear the right things, if you don't have straight hair as a black woman, you will not do well. And it was only recently when I started to kind of think, I'm black, so no matter where I go, people are going to see me as a black woman. They're going to see me as too much, too loud, and even if I'm quiet, I'm still too much. And recently I went to an event called Black Girl Fest, where we were the majority. There was literally just black women in the room, and we talked about taking up space. And I think it's coming from a place of privilege, because I know not everyone has the ability to do so, but being yourself unapologetically and being like, I'm going to wear my natural hair out if I want to. I'm going to speak in my Southeast accent if I want to, and try to create a space where black people can just live themselves unapologetically and still reach those higher elite spaces, like celebrities who are black and are creating their own, you know, businesses like Rock Nation with Jay-Z, for example, Black Girl Fest and kind of things, and thinking I can be elite, I can look how I want to, and hopefully other people will be able to reach that one day.
And just moving on to the last slide here, looking into the future. So at the start of Black History Month, Diane Abbott, standing for Jeremy Corbyn, represented her party at Prime Minister's Questions. In doing so, she became the first black MP at the dispatch box for Prime Minister's Questions. Like 35% of black and 32% of mixed ethnic households, Diane Abbott came from what can be considered an underprivileged background. She remains proof that people of black heritage and from underprivileged backgrounds can make it to the top. So what I would like us to do in answering the question that's on there is to keep it as short as possible so that I can summarize it all in terms of what our response is as a whole. So how can we secure a bright future with equal access to elite professions for Britain's black community? So if you could just put your hands up, I'd like as many hands up as possible, and I'd like to get as many responses as possible so we get a full-rounded view in the room. We'll start with you at the back there. I don't think I've heard from you.
I think the two main things are kind of having role models, and that could be through the government, like giving positions to BAME candidates instead of just always giving it to a white person. Because I know personally, if I see like a black person in a position of power, that inspires me a lot more than just seeing a black person do like any other job. And also education. At school, a lot of, I know, like ethnic minorities think they can only do like one type of job. They can't be a doctor, they can't be a lawyer, they can't be a politician. So that comes back to the role models when you've got people to look up to that look like you.
Okay. Yes?
I feel like certain schools, especially in certain areas, need to invest more time in trying to like kind of change the curriculum and kind of make it more diverse. Just in the sense of where, like, say for example, in history lessons in school, the only time you would ever hear about anything that black people have done in history or minorities have done in history was during like a certain time period of the year or Black History Month. Whereas now it's like we're seeing more and more black people doing bigger and bigger things, but then it's still not amplified enough, whether it's on the news or in schools. So I feel like there needs to be more of that.
Okay, can we? Yes?
I just want to add to what is said, that mentorship is so important, especially, I see that in academia. Apologies to everyone, but like in research, if you have like, you know, let's say someone from Asia comes to take up a professorship, within the next 2 years, everybody in the research group is an Asian. But like you never have that within our communities. Like you're looking for people to actually mentor you and help you along. And I think sometimes we black people can be our own biggest enemies. And I think within ourselves we need to help each other, pull each other up. That's the way to go. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that. I think it's a very dangerous line that you're taking there, if you don't mind me saying. I speak frankly all the time, so if I offend you, please tell me later and I'll run away. Yeah, we black people are not the fucking problem here.
No
we've
swearing,
been,
please.
sorry, it's part of my culture. I've grown up in the Northeast, but yeah, it's quite hard to shake off. So intra-African trade is at 20%. Yeah, we only trade with our own people at 20%. 80% is forced out of our continent. Why is that? We are still colonized today. So when we blame our own people and we blame ourselves for not aspiring high enough or not helping each other and all of that, we've been indoctrinated over 500 years to do just that. So we are actually European people with dark skin when we behave that way. Okay, so I really do take exception. It's not African people who are at fault here, it's history, and we need to shake that history off.
So, can you answer the question, please?
Again, I think you already know where I'm coming from in terms of elite professions. You know, we're aspiring to become European people in dark skin. So we're aspiring to dominate the world with the same status quo. If you want to assimilate, if you want to be complacent about the way the world is run, then you are just a colonizer in your skin.
So what should you do?
Get rid of the elite professions and change them and make the things that really make this planet work.
So create your own.
Yeah, create them as elites and pay the sewage workers more money, because without them we'd all die. Pay the people who look after us in the NHS and the African NHS, which isn't funded. Yeah, the people who are constantly trying to further humanity. Let's put them at the top of the ladder, not the bankers and not the politicians, not the David Cameron slave-owning families. Yeah, let's actually get some justice here instead of perpetuating more enslavement in future for a different sort of people, or maybe a different ethnicity, or maybe even white people being enslaved in future. It's the same systems being repeated over and over.
Okay, thank you. Oh, you wanted to?
I just want to say something here. I perfectly understand what you mean. My point was this. You see, what I've come to see is that the best people to help each other are people like ourselves. Honestly. Like, we are the ones that can pull each other up. And I totally get what you mean. I am saying, like that young man over there said, that we've got to take responsibility for our future. As black people. We can't wait for somebody else to come and save us. We've got to save ourselves. If I am in a place of position of power, my aim should be to help my sister and not to pull her down. I should look for ways to mentor her. Like, I want mentorship in my role, but you don't find people to do that. And that's what brings you up in the profession, pulling each other up. That's what I meant.
We've literally got 1 minute. 1 minute. So I need very, very short answers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Very, very short, please. Okay, we'll start here.
Just to kind of echo that a little bit, I feel like at the same time as well, we also need to we need to support each other in kind of like projects that we're doing and things like that. So I'll give you an example because this is something that kind of hurt me quite a fair bit as well. So at Northumbria, I tried to host one of my Black History Month events last week, and as much as it was promoted to a lot of the black students, there was 10 people that turned up to that, even though I know that there was over 70% of 70 of the black people that knew about it. But then the main reason why a lot of them didn't go is because there was no food. Like, just as we laugh about it, but things like that, it's quite triggering because it's like we're trying to build something for students to kind of have black students to be empowered, but then they don't want to go to it because there's no food. But then when it comes to it, they're going to start complaining that, we're not represented enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
We need to kind of do more to empower ourselves as well.
Yes. So the last 3, there's 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
I think it's important to level the playing fields at the earliest possible opportunity. And it would be something that would take time to, like, for an effect to be noticed, maybe 2 or 3 generations, but stripping away, like, all forms of privileges in school is really important, because then that gives everyone a level playing field as they're developing and they're learning and picking stuff up. If it's a level playing field from the get-go, then gradually, like, it's fairer. Like, for example, not having private schools, like, something like education shouldn't come, like, you shouldn't be able to, like, develop faster or stronger than another student because you have more money than them. So, yeah, like, level playing field from the earliest opportunity is important.
Yes, thank you very much. So we've got time for the last 2 people that I said. So let's answer the question again. How can we secure a bright future with equal access to elite professions for Britain's black community? Okay, I think you've got the mic, so you start first.
So looking at this for like the next 50, 100 years, racism is still going to be a thing because it's a matter of me looking at, a white person looking at me and seeing someone inferior, in some cases, not all. But I feel like for the past, like you said, 500 years, black people have been one of the biggest disadvantaged races, and I feel like now we are in a position where we have our own streams of income and we can kind of, in some cases, create our own kind of environments where we can thrive off ourselves. So I kind of agree 50-50 with both of you guys. Like, we do need to support each other. Some of us have way more money that can, mentor people, create kind of foundations and stuff like that. But at the same time, through colonization, we still have an impact that still affects us today. So I think one way that we could secure a future for us is kind of making sure that we are creating our own environments that we can thrive off because we understand what we're all going through. So like our own businesses, food, agriculture, everything, like black culture in the world, I guess, yeah.
And lastly?
I think everything that's just been mentioned is probably beyond our capacity as individuals or as a group to attain. But one thing that we can do, just the people in this room, is be activists. So take this conversation that we've had tonight and take it to everyone else at the university, the other students. for example, being turned away from counseling, if you go and publish that or tell the university that this is happening, that they will respond to that. So don't keep these conversations within us, because we can change one thing at a time, and it just starts with a few people and one university.
So in summary then, our question as a whole at Newcastle University today has been in answering to how we can secure a bright future with equal access to elite professions for Britain's black community. We've said that we need more role models and diverse curriculums to amplify our culture and have that understanding within ourselves. We need to create our own version of elite and also encourage mentorship. But most importantly, we also need to take responsibility and support each other. We need to take early opportunities to strip away privilege and make sure that we're well equipped to go out there into the world. But most importantly, and as I had mentioned at the beginning, and I'm echoing what was just said, we need to be activists. We need to talk about these issues within our circles. We need to tell the university if there's something that we're not happy with, or whatever the case is, let's write about it, let's talk about it, and that's the only way that we'll begin to take steps to actually getting something done. So that ends our debate for today. And thank you all for your participation. Thank you all who spoke. Thank you all who listened. Thank you all who were here to learn something. The three pillars that we have for the Great Debate Tour are education, empowerment, and expression. And one of the main things that we like to do with the Great Debate Tour is we have a feedback survey, which the bit.ly link is on there. So if you've got your phones, get your phones out and just fill in this brief survey. It literally takes about 3 minutes to fill in. And the reason that I'm encouraging us all to do this is because what we do with the data that we collect from the survey is we actually write a report, which is then presented at a finale at the House of Commons. So it's about amplifying what Newcastle University thinks on various topics. And we really do appreciate your comments. So please take the time right now to fill it in. And I'll just pass the mic on to Sarah. I think there's also some feedback forms because we're looking at being better and making better events.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all for being so engaged and contributing and talking about important things to do with black lived experiences. We have, as I said before, some feedback forms on, obviously, if it's to do with like specifics of debate, like it's probably best to feedback through their feedback form. This is more of just a general feedback form in terms of like what we can do better in the campaign in general. So if you have a minute to fill that in, that's really important. It is anonymous, so I won't be fuming at you if you hated the event or if you loved it or whatever. You can just do that freely. And just pick up anything that's on there. As I said before, there's some stand up to show racism, the red card, I keep getting this wrong. Show racism, the red card, promotional materials, which is great. It's a charity that Newcastle FC set up. So if you want to look into that campaign and fundraise for that, it's great. We also have our newspaper there. So if I didn't say before, but obviously there's toilets here as well, if you didn't know before, just on the left-hand side. And feel free to go and grab a bottle of water or whatever from the co-op as well upstairs. I should have said that at the beginning, but I completely forgot. But thank you very much, and thanks for coming today, and thanks to all our panellists who've been amazing. Giving us some really insightful comments. And thank you to the Great Debate Tour.
I think it's all been said. So what I'll do, I'll just put this slide that says, thank you. Thank you all for being here, and carry on these conversations and do more in your own communities. Thank you.